Hi everyone, Jimmy again from Timecode Pro here, doing a tutorial on a kind of scope, sniper scope if you will, or a lens effect. Let's have a quick look at this. We've got here a kind of black solid with a circle cut out the middle. I've got some footage in the background, and as you can see as I scan across, everything's being distorted. We've got some nice kind of prism effects going on here. It's kind of known as chromatic aberration. You get it when you look through a prism or a telescope or a microscope, anything like that. And as you can see, as I'm dragging around, everything's kind of following it as I do so. So it's just to give it a kind of more dramatic effects that you kind of would get when you look down a scope. I don't have a gun, I don't go shooting myself, but this is kind of how, making reference to games and stuff I've seen on TV and films, and that's just kind of how I've got to where I am. So let's take a look at what's going on here first. First of all, you can see we've got some dirt on the lens here. These little specks. Just I've done it on there just to give it a bit more of a kind of grimy, gritty, organic feel, so it's not so polished. We've also got this kind of splitting of the colours that I mentioned earlier. And now, as we move across, if you look closely, it's kind of gone distorted. Let's move out a bit. As I move across, you can see the colours kind of are more distorted on the edge than they are in the middle. This is a deliberate thing. It's kind of more split and looks more like a real kind of scope. If you hear any animal noises, that's my cat, please ignore that. So let's get straight in there and give this a go. I'm going to do a new composition. Full HD, 25 frames. Timing doesn't matter really. I can leave that at like 0.1 second and that's more than enough. Okay. Now I've got a bit of footage here that I'm going to use. It's just of some rubble. It's up to you guys what you want to do with your stuff. It's just a quick shot of some stuff lying around near me. I'm going to put that straight on my timeline. Now the first thing I'm going to do is split my colours up. I need 3 channels. For those of you that don't know, this is simplified as every kind of colour you see on your screen is made of red, green and blue. So I'm going to get 3 copies of this video clip. I'm going to go edit, duplicate, edit, duplicate, or I can go Apple D. So I've got 3 layers, and I'm going to rename these. Single click, if I hit enter or return, I can go R for red, G for green, and B for blue. Now I need to apply shift channels. Now what I want to do is make one layer completely red, one completely blue, one completely green. So to do this, let's take my red layer first. I'm going to take red from and leave that on red. Take green from red and blue from red. Now you'll notice everything will go black and white. That's completely fine. That's what we want. I'm going to copy this effect. Copy. Go to my green layer and just hit paste. But only change it so now I'm taking from green each time. So green, green, green. Copy that again. Do the same for my blue. Obviously change these to blue. Cool. So now we've got 3 layers all dedicating to their respective channel. So the next thing I need to do is throw a tint effect on there. I'm going to put this on my red first of all, and I'm going to change my map white to complete red. Now if you want to make sure you've got 100% red for this, there's a little kind of another method of doing it. I've got RGB just here. Basically any colour of these that I want to be absolute, I go red and hit 255, green 255 and make sure these are 0, and blue 255 and make sure they're 0. So from a red, as you can see, as I move these, the numbers sort of change. But 255, 0, 0. That's where we want to be on that. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to copy Apple C or Control C, depending on what you're on. Go to my green channel, paste it on there. So for my green, I can go red 0, green 255, and blue 0. And as you can see, we've got a kind of really strong green. I won't see it because my red layer is on top at the moment, but if I switch it off, I can see that we're all good on that. And then my blue, if I paste that effect again, my tint on there, and change this to red 0, green 0, blue 255. I get my blue channel if I flip it off. There we go. So I've got green, red and blue. Now what I need to do is be able to see all of these at the same time. So if I make sure I've clicked this button down here, my toggle switches and modes, I'm going to change all my modes from normal to add. And that'll essentially go back to how the original clip was. Just sort of plonk that on there so you can see. So I've put my original video on there, and there's really very little, next to no difference between that and these three merged videos with all their channels. So I mean, straight away what you can start doing, just to get a quick kind of chromatic aberration, colour split effect. So if I go full screen a second, I get my red channel, and I can either use my cursor keys to move left and right, or I can just click and drag. I'm going to sort of tap a few times here, put my red just to the right, get my blue and shift up to the left. Let's have a look. Hard to see, I'm going to do that a bit more. There we go. As you can see, I'm getting this nice kind of distorted look going on, especially on the lighter, the contrasted areas. You can see it really well. But I don't particularly want to do that just yet, but just so you guys can see what's going on. So I'm going to Apple Z that, so they're all back to where they should be. This number is going to be a recurring thing, as you'll see. It's going to be 960, 540. Try and remember those numbers for later on, because that's going to be, well, that by default is our centre position for all our layers that we put on. So back where we are, I've got our three video layers all on top of each other, different colours at the right place. Next up, I'm going to throw on my red layer. I'm going to type in optic, and I want this effect here, optics compensation. If I click and drag that onto my red, I'm going to solo that for a second. And what this does is it essentially distorts, it bends the video. So if you see, as I click and drag, I get this kind of ball-like effect going on here, which is it's kind of what we want, but we want it to bend the other way. So if I click on this reverse lens distortion, there we go, we kind of get this predator, alien-y kind of thing going on. I can move this around my centre point, you can see it distorts quite nicely. Listen to that. So what I need to do is, if I put this back to 0, copy this effect onto my other layers, my green and my blue. So I've got this optics compensation on all three layers. Now next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go layer, new, null object. And on my null, if I hit return, I'm going to call this controller. You'll see why in a second. If I go to effect and expression controls, I choose slider. Now what this does is it can command any layer or any effect that we attach to it. So in this instance, if I go to my red layer, my R layer, if I hit E for effect, I can go to my optic compensation, and on my field of view, the little bit that makes it kind of distort, if I alt click on that, so that's option click or alt click, whatever you want to call it, alt click, I'm going to go to my controller, hit E, get my slider, so I can see both my expression that's popped up here when I alt clicked on my little stopwatch, and I'm going to get this sort of thing here, my pick whip, and I'm going to pick my slider. So now what happens when I slide that, it does essentially what that other control does. There's a reason for that, you can probably already guess. I'm going to do the same on each of my green and blue effect. So if I copy this expression, I can go to my green, hit E for effect, go to my optic compensation, and on my field of view I do the same thing. I alt click, done it, I click on my expression and I hit paste. Control V, Apple V, depending on what we're on. And finally, let's do that one more time on my blue, field of view, alt click and paste. Okay, so that's good. Let's unsolo my red so I can see all of them. So now on my controller, as you can see, they're all doing it at the same time, which is great, but you're probably thinking, okay, why not just do it on one and be done with it? Well, let's have a look. If I go on my red layer again, and I double tap E for effects, and do the same on my green, EE, and blue, EE, just slide this up so you can see what's going on. I am going to, at the end of my expression, just put in a little bit of maths. I really can't stand maths, but this is so simple. All I need to do is put multiplied by. 0.9. So it's going to be 90%. This number here, my field of view, will be 90% of my slider control. Now this one I want to have as, let's try, multiplied by, so that's my asterisk key, which is Shift 8 for those using an Apple keyboard. I'm not sure about Windows. Let's try 0.88, and then on this one I'm going to go multiplied by 0.86. So now as you can see, my edges are really kind of distorted and the colours are all split up. It's probably a bit too much. Yeah, I'm going to knock that down a bit. So instead of 0.88, I'm going to do 0.89. Change this one to 0.88. So I'm going down 0.01 each time. So 90, effectively 90, 89, 88. Okay, that's not so bad. I could keep tweaking that and getting it exactly right, but I'll leave that for you guys to mess around with. So if I go out all the way and change my slider, you can see they all do it in proportion. Now another reason for doing this is that if you look at a reference photo of this, you'll find that they're not perfectly kind of lined up, all the colours. You'll get your red and your blue being opposite end of the spectrums. So this kind of, I guess, replicates that a bit better. Okay, so I've got all my effects in there now. Everything's linked up to this one controller. The next thing I'm going to do is throw in a new layer. So layer, new, solid. Choose a black solid, and I'm going to call this one eyepiece. Okay, so that's my full comp size. Now I'm going to get a new mask, push and hold on my rectangle tool, get the ellipse. Now if I go right into the centre, so you can see my crosshair here, if you can't see that, make sure you've clicked on your black layer first. Go right in the centre here, guys, and push and hold. Now if I hold Command, or I don't know what the equivalent to be, I guess Control on a Windows machine, and Shift, I can drag out in proportion, so it's making a perfect sphere all the way up. So I'm going to go quite large. There's a reason for this, which you guys will soon see. So if I go back here, that'll be just shy of the whole thing, the whole comp. And I'm going to change it from Add in my mask. Don't get it mixed up with your mode. And then my mask bit here, go from Add to Subtract. So now I've got something a bit more like my original comp. Oh, remind me. Come back here at the end. We'll see what that is. It's related to what we're doing, which is pretty cool. So yeah, we're getting somewhere a little nearer that now. Not quite, but if I up my distortion level on my controller, let's say around there, you can already see we're getting, like I said, a little bit closer to that. So I'm going to scale this up a lot. Now the reason is quite simple, really. If I wanted to move my mask around, I have to put keyframes for my mask path, which I don't want to do. I want to be able to move the whole layer like that. But when I do, obviously, I get this kind of issue going on. You can see the whole thing behind it. So if I scale this up, so it's ridiculously large, and I'm going to hit M on the keyboard, double tap it, MM, and I've got my mask expansion. So if I start now dragging that back down, I can kind of control how small the eyepiece is. So if you look, my layer is actually, well, it's massive. It's 380% of its original size. But the nice thing with that is I can start clicking and dragging around, and I don't have to worry about the corners, eating into the image, which is exactly where we want to be, which is good. Now, if you look closely, you might be able to tell I'm getting this kind of jaggedy edge thing, which I don't want. So if I click on my toggle switches and modes button, I can click this button here. This is continuous rasterization. Effectively, it just smooths the edges out. That's all you need to know for the time being, which is cool. Next thing, I'm going to go click on my eyepiece layer, hit F for feather, and give it just about 1 or 2 pixels of feathering, depending on how big you did your circle. I'll leave it up to you to decide how much you need to do it. Okay, so that's good. It's nice and kind of soft on the edges, not too harsh. Now the problem is when I move this around now, you see when I go to the left or to the right, it's not following my direction of my layer. So I need to link everything. That's my field of view on my my view center for my optics compensation. I need to link all of these for my red, green and blue to my position of this layer. So let's just do it on one really quick. On my red I'm going to hit E, get my optics compensation, and on my view center if I alt click on this I get my expression up here. Just going to ignore that for a second. I'm going to go on my layer, hit P for position, and all I need to do again is get this little pick whip and pick whip the position. Now I can quite easily just copy this expression here, so highlight it, Apple C, Control C or whatever it is. E on my green layer, do the same thing, so view center, alt click, paste. Blue, E, view center and paste. So now if we take a look, there we go, everything follows where it needs to go. So again we're getting a little closer to our final look. So a few more bits to go on there and we're nearly there. Okay, so next up we are going to throw on, let's throw some kind of grit, some realistic sort of dirt on the lens. I've got it's actually a video copilot, part of the optical flares package. It's just a PNG, it's just a graphic of kind of like a dirty lens, but these look really, really good to kind of add that hint of realism to your work. You can overdo it, which a lot of people do, but if you're subtle with it, it can look really, really smart. So I'm going to get my dirty kind of graphic, drag and drop, make sure it goes beneath my black layer. If I put it above my eyepiece, I get that, and that's no good to me. It needs to go beneath it. Now what I'm also going to do is scale this down, so I'm going to hit S for scale, click and drag, so it's just within the parameters of our mask layer here. And I'm going to change its transfer mode, so again toggle switches and modes, change it from normal to, let's try overlay. That's not too bad, it's a bit contrasty though, so if I hit T for transparency, it gives us this so we can see how transparent or opaque we want it. If I go somewhere in the middle, I guess around 50 is good enough. I can adjust it if I need to. There you go, you can kind of see it coming into play a bit more now. Okay, that'll do. Now, you can cycle through these one at a time. A quick way of doing it is if you hold Shift, then tap plus on the keyboard, you can go through these one at a time and get the one that works for you. So in actual fact, that looks quite cool. What am I on here? I'm on linear dodge. Now, if I've got it too bright, obviously it's eating too much into the highlights of my video. Anyway, I'll leave that for you guys to play around with. So it's my transfer modes, my toggle switches bit, and any of these will be good. Have a good experiment with them. So the problem I've got, like we had at the beginning, was if I get my eyepiece layer, click and drag, my dirt doesn't follow it. As you can see, I can see the edges of it, which is just daft. Let's undo that. Now it's the same thing that we did earlier on. So P for position. I'm going to alt click, and I'm going to pick whip my position of the eyepiece, just like we did for other layers. So now when we move around, everything follows in tandem. It's looking pretty cool. Okay, so there's really just a couple more steps now. I'm going to go layer, new, adjustment layer. On my adjustment layer, I'm going to throw in a fast blur. I mean, just for those that don't know, there's loads of blurs out there. What have we got? Box blur, radio. I'm not going to sit and list these, but as you can see, there's quite a few. Fast blur, as it kind of sounds, it's just quick, simple. Lens blur would be quite nice for this, but it's really hungry on the processor, so I'm not going to use that for this one. I'm just going to give it a slightly soft look to it. So for me, 5 works. As I say before, you guys might find a different number. But I don't want to blur the whole thing, I just want to do the edges. So a quick way of doing this would be to get my adjustment layer with my blur on, get my ellipse tool, go into the middle of my layer, and do the same as we did earlier on. So I'm going to, let's undo that. I'm going to click and drag first, then I hold either Control and Shift or Apple and Shift, depending on what machine we're on. And I'm going to go just to the edges. So say around there, almost bang on our normal eyepiece. Now what this has done, it's just blurred the whole inside of it, which we don't want. So I'm going to go change my mask layer from add to subtract. You think, great, why have we done that? Well, if we hit F for feather and start feathering this out, if you look in the corners, there's a really soft kind of blur going on. That's not quite enough, so I'm going to hit M, double tap like we did earlier, so I've got my mask expansion. You should be able to see that as I drag that up or down, I can either blur more or less of my scope. So it's just a case of balancing your feathering, which is at the moment 65. I'm going to knock that down to like something quite low, and just get it so I'm happy. So around there it's good for me. Well, mine, I've got six feathers, value of 6 for my feathering, and my mask expansion is at -16. But as I say, everyone watching this will have different numbers that work for them. So now as you can see, we've got this nice soft thing. It's kind of graduated along with our distortion and our dirt. Looks pretty smart. The last thing I'm going to do is just put on some levels, LEV, ELS, click and drag, and throw that on my adjustment layer also. Now if I just start playing around with my input black, you should see I get a kind of nicer, darker edge. It's probably a bit too much. I'm just going to put that down just a touch. Only a really subtle effect this, but once we start moving our eyepiece around, our eyepiece layer, you can see everything's up. What haven't I done? I haven't linked to my adjustment layer. So let's go back and do that. I'm going to undo that. Get my adjustment layer, and once again, P for position. Alt click on my position and pick whip the position of our eyepiece. So as you can see, I mean, I didn't go into much detail in this earlier, but whatever my number is on my eyepiece now, all of these that are pick whip to it will be exactly the same. So if I change that, they all follow. It's really handy for like following lots of layers around in a composition. It's something I'll probably look at in another tutorial. But let's just concentrate on this for a second. So I'm going to feather this out a bit more actually, just so it graduates better. Now as I do my input black again, there we go, that's what we want. Kind of nicer, well for me I think it's nicer, you guys might disagree, but it gives it more kind of definition, more contrast on the edges, and really shows off your colour split. And because you've got that blur, it doesn't look so regimented, it doesn't look so kind of forced as an expression. I mean, I can go back to my controller, my null object, and change the amount if I'm not happy with it. If I want it to be like stupidly out, like, I don't know, like that, so I can only see what's going on right in the middle, then so be it. If I get my eyepiece, like, again, drag around, everything's linked, everything's dynamic, and it all looks pretty cool. For me that's too much, so I'm going to knock that down. Let's say, okay, I only want a bit more than that. Let's go around 160. 160 for me looks kind of cool. Yeah, we'll go for that. Okay, so I'm going to refer back to our other piece. I think that's pretty much it. I've got my crosshair here. All I've done for that, I've made a new comp, full HD, got a black solid, and just drawn using my rectangle tool, my mask, just some shapes. Nothing extravagant here, guys. Obviously you can throw in some Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, Battlefield, Crosshairs, whatever you like. Be creative, be experimental. The nice thing is, because in this composition I've got my crosshair comp, so if I double click in that on CS5, don't think it works the same in CS3. If not, if I want to go into a composition, I can just go up here. So if I go back to my original one, and I want to see what's in Crosshair, I can either double click on that in CS5, possibly CS4 as well. And if I want to see what's actually in there on CS3, I just need to double click up here in my project window. I'll let it open up for me. And the cool thing is, if I get this and start updating it, let's say I want to put a let's go for an ellipse. Let's say I want to do the same thing you see on some kind of games and films. I can start adding stuff in, like so. If I start playing around with these, okay, it looks ridiculous, I know, but as you see, when I go back in here, it's all updated. So just a nice little workflow tip for you there. compositions in compositions work really well. So as you can see, we're pretty much back to where we were on our original. This is my original here. I've got a lot more blurring going on and probably a bit more distortion than I have in here, but still, that's pretty much it. I hope you kind of enjoyed making this. It'd be cool to see people's appliances for this, how you've got away and like, messed around with it. If I had the time, I probably would have gone out and shot something just to kind of simulate it. But I'm sure anyone watching this can see how it'd be applied. Let's just hop back to that thing I clicked on earlier. This is what kind of inspired me to make the tutorial. Let's flick these off. I have another clip here of someone dancing. It's just a short clip of a girl dancing on a rooftop. Very cool breakdancer, Sammy Jenkins. We're checking her out. So yeah, this is just a short piece we shot a while back, and I used it as some kind of practice footage to do some, I guess, dynamic chromatic aberration. So I don't want to dwell on this too much because this is like a whole tutorial in itself. But if I bring these layers on, so I've done the same thing. I've got my red, my green, my blue. I've got my controller. So this one's a little more kind of complicated, and arguably it's not really that necessary. But let's have a look. I've got a load of controllers here, and they're all, as you can see, they're all linked somehow. So for I've got a red distort and a red blur, green distort, green blur, blue distort, blue blur. Now for my red distort, what this is, if I just let's solo my red channel. My red distort is linked to, if you look on my controller down here, if I go EE, I can see my expressions. So red distort is saying master distort slider. So I can go to my master distort slider. So that would suggest that whatever this number is, the red follows. But as you can see, not a lot is changing. The reason is because I've linked it to another kind of controller called bass, which is just here. So if I hit EE, sorry, in this case just E, what I've done is that I've extracted the track that she's dancing to. I've gone right click, keyframe assistant, convert to audio, got a set of keyframes here, and this is what's driving my distortion amount. So as you can see, when I get a peak in the audio here, so I'm at 64, that's driving my master distortion, which is then affecting all of my distortion levels beneath that. So it's a lot of clicking and dragging, a lot of expressions, but if I flip all these back on, you'll be able to see what it looks like when they're all working together. So as you can see, loud music, big bass line, lots of distortion. And the nice thing is once you've done it, it just works itself for the whole comp. I don't need to adjust anything. I can change my view center. But yeah, it's probably a bit over the top, this one, but I don't know, I kind of like it. Now, if I want to change anything like the amounts, I can hop into these individual expressions and start putting, like we did before, divided by 50, so that's half of whatever it's linked to, or multiplied by whatever. And it's all updatable, all with some really simple maths. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. Feedback, comments, ideas for other tutorials are all welcome. And yeah, let me see what you guys can make. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.